Welcome to DrupalEasy Show Tell, where I attempt to use or do something in Drupal that I've never used or done before. Now, demoing things like this is something I've been doing for years during DrupalEasy office hours. DrupalEasy Show and Tell is a little bit different. I've got some expert help. Each episode, I'll have a guest that just so happens to be a subject matter expert for whatever it is that I'll be playing with. Now, before we begin, I want to make sure you know about our live online classes. We have regularly occurring sessions of our 2-week professional single directory components class, as well as our 15-week professional module development class and our 12-week Drupal Career Online beginner focused course. For specific dates and pricing, you know what to do. Head on over to DrupalEasy.com.
John Picozzi from Talking Drupal and EPAM. Welcome to DrupalEasy Show and Tell. How's it going?
It's going great, Mike. How are you?
All right, pretty good. What do you do at EPAM? Are you are you back end, front end, project manager? What do you tell your mom that you do for work?
Oh man, what do I tell my mom? I tell her I work on websites. That's usually about it.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I'm actually a solution architect
Okay.
on our Drupal team at EPAM, and my job is to kind of sit between the development team and the client and make sure that all of the great things that we're dreaming up can actually be built. So sometimes I'll be doing POCs, proof of concepts for the client to say, hey, yeah, look, you can do these modules in this order, and like, hey, you'll get that thing. And then also just explaining, like, hey, here's what we need to do for the client to the development team. So kind of working in Jira, developing requirements and testing things, and kind of a little bit of everything, I guess.
You are the universal translator.
Yes, that's
Yes.
that's
There you go.
that is perfect. A perfect analogy.
All right. Well, you're here to help explain the config split module, or officially known as configuration split, as is shown on this page. But I don't think anybody calls it configuration split. Everyone just says config split,
It's like
right?
that. It's like that weird thing in Drupal where the name of the module on the screen doesn't match the
Oh,
slug in the
that makes
URL,
me, yeah, that makes me
and the
crazy.
slug in the URL is actually shorter and easier, so everybody
Yeah,
just goes with that.
yeah. All right, so here's what we're gonna do. We are gonna kind of give a little bit of background on the configuration system,
Yes.
and so we're gonna do some initial configuration stuff, and then we're gonna implement config split, and we're gonna talk about like why you might want to implement it. So as a setup, here's what I have. I've got a local site, Drupal 11. It's actually from the Drupal Career Online class earlier this year. I just reinstalled everything. So this is running on DDev, and I am using the environment indicator module, so that's green up here. And then I also have a dev version of this site. It's identical, you can see, look at that, except for the environment indicator color is red and it says div. And this is up on Pantheon. So the idea is that we are going to initially export some config from our local, um, and then we'll be able to push that up through the Pantheon interface into our remote dev. But eventually, the goal of config split is we want to have slightly different configuration on local as we do dev. And that's what the config split module will do for us. So, John, why don't you get us rolling here, and let's talk. Let's kind of walk us through initially setting up, being able to import and export config, and why we like that, and how that works.
Great. So let's start with configuration management. Just but before we get into config split, because config split is a contrib module, right?
Right.
So configuration management in Drupal was introduced in Drupal 8, and basically it allows for importing and exporting single sets of configurations from the database to the file system. We'll kind of talk about what that means in a
Mm-hmm.
little bit. But if you go, yep, right where you're going there, so go into the
Mm-hmm.
configuration synchronization area, right? This is kind of the main interface for config management. in Drupal, right? So here you have a screen that says synchronize. If you were to make changes, and we'll do this in a minute, if you were to make changes here, you'd see them. You'd be able to review those changes to understand, like, oh, if I import this config, here's what's going to happen.
Now, what do you mean by config? Let's define config. I know it's a tough
Yeah.
question, but
So configuration is, and I'm gonna say this is gonna be a really tricky statement. So brace yourselves. Configuration is or config is anything that is not content in your Drupal site. Ha, right? So you're like, okay, well, what's not content, right?
yeah.
So let's take a node, for example, right? So everybody's familiar with a node, basic page node, right? The node itself, the fields on the node are all configuration, right? When you create a about me page, right? You put a title in, you put a body in, that's all content.
Yeah, let me back up because I wasn't sure you were going, so I was showing the wrong thing. So I'm gonna go backwards. When you add title and body and all this stuff, this is the content.
Correct.
When you are determining what fields and whatnot are available for that content type, this is all config.
Correct. Yep. Yeah, and sometimes those lines can be a little bit blurry. You think of taxonomy and menus, for example, or blocks, right?
Yep.
So a block itself is configuration, but the content inside of a block is content. So when you export your configuration, you don't get the block content, which means you have to recreate it on your site.
Right. And Drupal helps a little bit every now and then with like this menu link I like a lot, add content block. So this is
correct.
telling you like this is content.
Yep. Yep. Yeah.
But,
So it'll tell you, again, when you're filling in, think of it this way: when like if you're doing something that sets a setting, right, for an item in Drupal, right, that's probably config. If you're typing in content, about me, hi, I'm John Picozzi, that's content, right? So, and those are kind of stored differently too. So we'll get into how config is stored in a minute, but yeah, the content is stored in the database and kind of lives there.
And there's definitely some gray area. Like menu items are content.
Correct.
But where they are placed is configuration.
Yep.
And stuff like this, which site name, slogan seems like content, but technically all this stuff is actually configuration. So, all right. So we probably confused everyone more than we needed to there. Maybe not.
Yeah.
Maybe we helped a little bit. We helped about 8%, I think.
Yeah. I mean, ultimately it's kind of a little bit of trial and error. And I mean, the nice thing is the next step that we show you with configuration sync, the synchronization screen, it'll show you exactly what is and isn't configuration. So you'll be able to know, like, hey, I just edited the site name. Oh, it's configuration. Or, oh, I just updated the title on my about page. Oh, it's content. So,
all right. So what do we have to do to set up our initial, this site has nothing set up for configuration yet. So what do we need to do to export our first set of configuration?
okay. So you already have config in Drupal core ready to go because you have the configuration synchronization screen.
That comes with the standard installation profile. Yeah.
Yep. So you're good at that point. So let's make a small change. Why don't you change your site name, for example?
Well, we haven't done the initial export though.
Okay.
So
yeah.
Let's do that.
Let's do that.
I haven't even created a config directory.
Oh boy. All right. So yeah, good points. Okay. So let's first set up our config directory. So do you have you don't have that created. So let's create that.
Nope. So over here.
Yep. So you're going to create the config directory above your web root, right? Perfect. Yep. So then in
the
that
project root. Yep.
Yep. In that directory, there's nothing in that folder, right?
Nope.
Okay. Then you're going to have to uncomment a setting in your settings.php to direct Drupal to use that directory for your configuration exports. So looks like, yep, you're doing that right there. Yep. There we go. So you'll see here that you have config common set up. All right. So it's gonna store your common set of configuration in that folder, which means
And
that's going to be configuration that applies to all of your sites. We'll get more into that when we talk about config split, because that's where that's really going to be important.
and these names are not special. These names, you
They
can
are
call your
not.
directories anything.
I
You
think.
actually told me about calling this common and kind of convinced me that that's a good idea. I think a lot of folks, you'll see it called sync,
Yep. Yeah,
SYNC.
I think that's actually what maybe Drupal core calls it when you
Uh,
do a fresh install of Drupal. I think it's
mhm.
actually the sync directory. I don't know if it's the config directory, but
Should we
um
come back over here and create a common directory then? Let's do that.
um you do. Yeah, you should probably do that. Yep. There you go. All right. So now you're good there. So let's go into Drupal and just see what
Hang on 1 second. I lost my video. Okay, here we go. I don't know. My phone, for some reason, spontaneously decided it was going to be the camera.
there you go.
All right. So, all right. So now we're going to go into configuration, right?
Yep. Let's go into, yep, synchronization. Now, if you were to do an export through the UI, you could you could do that, but it would export it to a file, and you don't really necessarily want to do that.
Yeah, I would
Um,
export it through the browser, download it through the browser, then I'd have to
yeah.
unzip it, then I'd have to put it in here,
And I
which we
will
don't
say,
want
going
to do.
back to that screen real quick, there is a single item tab there.
Yeah,
Useful if you're kind of getting new, if you're new to config and you're trying to figure out where like configuration items live. You can
right,
export single items and look at them to kind of get a better understanding.
right.
But we're going to use the command line because it's going to do a great job of exporting what we need to export and putting it in the right place. So to do that, you're going to run drush command, which is drush config export, or the short code for that is CEX. So depending on CEX, obviously less letters, but
Yep.
want to give you the full command so that way you know. So if you hit
So
enter
what is it?
there,
What's this actually going to do?
this is going to take everything that is in your active configuration, and we'll talk a little bit more about this in a minute, but
Right.
active configuration is everything that's in your database, right? All the config that's
Configuration that's in the database. Yeah,
correct, all the
not content.
configuration that's in the database, and then it's going to export it to that folder that we defined. And it's going to show you what it's
Hopefully. Yeah.
doing. Yep. So there you go. Boop, boop, boop. Looks like it's done. Now let's go. Yep. Hey, look at that. So you'll see you have all of these files, core entity, field, block, all sorts of fun stuff. Core extensions right there. That's actually where all your module enablements and whatnot live. So you see that yes, this actually just did an export. So there you go. We're all
Right.
done. We can pack it up. We've
Okay,
we've we've
good.
done our config export. Now,
Fantastic. All right. So I'm going to, before we do anything else, I'm going to just throw all of these changes into Git.
yeah, and here
Websites.
I like to do for expediency, Mike's doing just a git add, but I usually like to do a git add -p just to see what in that configuration is going up. It's a good way to make sure that you're not actually putting sensitive information that could be stored in config into your repo. Like a lot of times you'll see if you're using like a SS or a key for a certain service that sometimes that gets stored in config. Okay, so your synchronization screen is clean, right? It says there's active configuration is identical, which is exactly what we want. But
Yep.
let's illustrate what it looks like if there is a change. So
Right.
if we go into site settings, right? Let's make a simple change at first here, just to
Okay.
show folks what we're looking at.
So before I click on this, I do want to say, so when we see this, this basically means that the configuration in these files exactly matches the configuration in the database,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
So by definition, since we exported the configuration from the database to the files, they kind of have to be identical. But now we're going to kind of throw a little instability in there
because it's fun.
because it's fun. So let's name, so we'll change the site name. Let's do config split demo.
Perfect.
All right, so that's a configuration change. It's been saved. So when you hit this button, this configuration gets saved to the database.
Correct.
It does not automatically update these files.
Correct.
Okay. So now what's the configuration of the database does not exactly match what's in the files. So if we go to here,
Oh, look at that. We got things.
yeah, this I tell my students that this stuff can be misleading. So
It sure
this,
can.
yeah, this is the important stuff down here.
I mean, it alerts you that there is a change, but the items after it are not necessarily always accurate. So if you so you'll see you do have a change here. The system site file did, or database entry did change, and you'll see that we have active and staged configuration here, and one is the new name config split demo, one is the old name DCO spring 2025. So active and staged. Let's talk about that for just a second here, right?
Please, yeah.
So active configuration is what's in the database, right? So when you see active on this screen, you're like, this is in my database. Staged is what's in the file system. So what was the output of that config export that we did, right? So because we made a change in Drupal, right, to the database, we have not yet exported that change. Our staged configuration, or what's in the file system, is going to be different than what's in our database, right? So this screen shows you that. And this will actually happen for any change you make. So if you were to go in and change, we'll see it in a little bit with the SMTP module. Like if you see, you see that sort of change where you change a couple of different fields, all of them will be kind of highlighted in the same way here and outlined as changes.
Right. And the other, I do want to say that we do have an import all button here.
Yep.
This is the same as config import, where we did a config export before.
Right. So if you were to actually hit that button right now, right, what would happen is basically your change to your title would get erased because it would take that staged config and overwrite the active config. So we don't want to do that, right? Instead, we actually want to do another config export, which we know how to do, right? We're going to run our drush command. And you'll see, hey, there are the changes. Do you want to export them? Yes, I do.
So this table is like the same information as this table.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
So we want to say yes.
And then once you do this, you say yes here. You could do a git diff, right, if you wanted to, just to see what has changed in the file. So that's another way of kind of reviewing the files if you wanted to.
Right. So yeah. So this is basically, well, I just exported so they're the same now, but
yep,
that was the same information. So you could see the file used to have this, but I just exported, so now it has the new value.
Yeah, exactly. So if you refresh that screen, yep, now you're back to a stable state or an identical state.
Right. And so just for the heck of it, I'll do a git add config, git commit -m, updated site name. And then I'm going to go ahead and push this up to Pantheon while we're talking, and then we'll circle back on that. So, all right. So that's the basics of exporting initial config and keeping track of config. Like if we added a new view or something here, or tweaked a view, that would show up the same way as a configuration change.
Yep.
And if we want to kind of keep track of that configuration change with Git, we do the exact same process.
Yep. Yeah. Any config changes, if you see, a node change, a view change, a block change, those are all going to show up in various files. So I will say that the kind of site title name was a pretty clean change, right? It only affected one file. Nodes, views, blocks, sometimes those can affect multiple files because you have fields involved there. So your config export could get kind of lengthy.
All right, so we covered the basics. So now, why would we need this?
So that's a great question. So you can
here.
So you can see that with core config management, right? You have the ability to export one set of config and import one set of config to the same site, right? So that's important to understand. Something we didn't say earlier, the config is hashed so that you can only import it to the same site that you exported it from. But as people that build websites, right, we know that, hey, we have different environments, right? We have a dev environment, we have a production environment, we have some environments in between, right? So those environments sometimes need different sets of configuration. One thing that we're going to show here today is devel module, right? You want devel on locally, you want devel on dev. You don't want devel on production, right? So based on changes in config based on those environments, you would need different sets of config for those environments. Configuration management in Drupal core does not allow for that. It's one config for everybody, right? That's why config split has been created and is so widely used, because it allows you to split your configuration based on, there are two different workflows you can use with config split. We're going to show today an environment-based workflow, which is we're going to have one config for local, one config for dev, right? You can also take a feature-based approach where you split out your config based on features. So sometimes people do this with things like Fastly or Cloudflare, where, hey, we need caching on our production environment, but we don't really need it on lower environments. You could also take the same approach with the devel module, where, hey, we need devel on local and dev, but we don't need it on those upper environments. So just two different ways of kind of structuring your configuration management, your config splits. Let's focus on environment splits, but just know that feature splits are something you could think about too.
Exactly. All right. So let's see if those changes were brought up to Pantheon. Looks like
Sure
they
were.
were. If I come over here real quick. Now, if I just reload, we're not going to see the change, and
You're
explain why.
not, no. So by default, Pantheon does not do a config import when your code gets pushed to their environment. You could automate this and set up kind of like after push hooks to say, hey, when I do a push, run these sets of commands to do a config import, clear cache, those sorts of things. I personally actually like to do it myself because of just the Pantheon gives you that great dev test and live environments. I like to make sure that when I'm pushing config changes that things aren't gonna blow up. So
Right.
you can actually, well, I
We've
don't
got
know
a
how.
lot of
Yeah, go ahead.
we have a lot of stuff on this. I'm on Pantheon Dev.
Yep.
There's a lot of changes here because John and I did a trial run of this, and I forgot to completely clean out the dev site. But
I think we'll be
that's
okay.
yeah,
So
this is the one that I want to show.
yep, that's the one we want, right? So that one looks good. So two ways we can do this, right? One is the simple way of just clicking that import button right down there at the bottom, right? So that'll import all of our config. The other way is you can actually run a terminus command from within DDev and do it that way. So yeah, you have choices.
So we're going to import the config that's in the file system, that's in this common directory.
Yep.
And we'll
Haha.
address this in a second. But one important thing to mention about when you do a config import or a config export, it's all or nothing. So you are importing
Yep.
all of the config for the entire site, and you are exporting all of the config for the entire site. And then every now and then you get weird stuff like this happening.
Where you'll notice that those
yeah.
fields, they just have been reordered.
Yeah. So it's not really a config change, it's just the order of these two items or their placement in
And
in the array has changed for some oddball reason. So it's not really an issue.
yeah, usually I will try to run the import again just to see if it was, some sort of cascade happened there where it needed one update before it could do the other update. But if I run it twice and it still shows up, I just move on.
It'll clear itself up. All right. So
Yes.
let's set up config split. We're going to set up two splits. We're going to do a local split where the devel module is enabled. And then we're going to do a live split where the only change is that we're going to enable SMTP. And those are going to be two slightly different types of splits, but we are going to set up two of them. So where do we start? What do we do?
All right. So start by enabling the config split module. Let's start there because that is the first step. There we go. I like how you typed split there as opposed to configuration because you would have gotten a couple more things there.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. So that module is installed. So when you go to your menu now for development, you'll see config split settings. You want to click into that. And then we're going to go ahead and create our two splits. So I'll walk through this process as Mike's doing it. So our first split is going to be our local split. You can call it local. You can give it a description if you want to. You'll see that down below there you have storage options. So that's basically just asking where the config is going to be stored. I typically always use folder because I've never used any of the other options where I had a need to. But yeah, you can research those. I think.
Well, the nice thing about folder is that keeps it inside of Git.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I think the database one is interesting. I've never tried it, but I can see maybe there being a use case for that. So here you are going to enter the folder that you want your stuff to be stored in, right? So we're going to do, based on the web root, we're going to do 2 dots and a slash, right? We're going to go to config. And then we are actually, as you can see, Mike's already set this up. We're going to put a local folder in there, right? So now we're going to pause here and go create our local folder. We're actually going to create both folders so we don't have to come back and do this again. But so you can do this step before you configure config split or as we're doing it, midstream. So right here, actually, just go back to the folder structure for a second. So right here, I want to kind of explain what's going on because we have our common folder, right? And now we have a live and a local. So what's going to happen is config split is going to store the split config in the appropriate folder, live or local, depending on which split we have settings for, right? But that common folder, and the reason I call it common is because that is going to apply to every environment. Oops, excuse me. So that common folder, everything in that common folder is going to apply, no matter if it's local, dev, production, test, whatever. That common folder is going to apply.
So the other thing we should mention is, so as we're setting up these splits, this is configuration itself, kind of like the metadata about the split.
Sure is.
And when we save this metadata gets saved in common.
Correct.
Right.
Yep.
So it doesn't matter if it's a local only split or a live, or if we have 13 splits, the configuration of each split is saved in common.
Correct.
And then we'll see also when we get to complete split, and we'll do a complete split for the local. That basically that information that we're doing a complete split of a module, that actually gets saved in that same like local configuration or live configuration. So it might end up where we have a local split, but we don't have any files in here.
Yep.
That is possible. So, all right.
Okay, so let's go back up. We've put our folder name in there. Perfect. We're going to uncheck the active checkbox because what we're actually going to do is set our active state in our settings.php file with environment variables. So that way it'll automatically activate the right split when the time comes.
Yep.
Okay, so for now, I think we're good here. Let's save this.
We'll circle back and we'll make some changes in a moment.
And then let's create our live split following the same exact process.
And for this, for this show and tell, we're going to be enabling the live split in a dev environment so we don't have to mess with 13 and 4 environments. So
I mean, that could be 13 if you want to
That could be.
you want to
Yeah.
go that far, but
You want to let's get nuts. So config live, and again, not active. So all the same stuff, just a different name.
yep.
And then we'll circle back and finish that.
Okay. So here you can see that we have live, local, both inactive, just kind of sitting there, right? So let's actually activate the local environment or the
All
local
right.
split.
All right. So I'll come over here and I'm going to do a little.
I give you a lot of credit for using your command line text editor. I think that's
I don't use it. I mean, I am not a I'm an IDE guy, but for stuff like this makes sense. All right, so maybe we should talk about this little structure I have set up because I set it up for environment indicator, but you can see I've got some stuff commented out. So you want to talk about that real quick?
yeah. So let's start first with the lines that are commented out, right? Config split dot local status, right? So we are basically with that line setting the status of our splits, right? So you can see there, as Mike has highlighted, if we uncomment that code specifically, it's going to make our live split inactive or false, and then it's going to make our local split active or true, right?
So these are basically just the code equivalent of
That
that.
checkbox.
You
Yep.
can even
And
it even tells you the
it
code right
even says
there.
it right there. Yep, exactly.
Okay.
So that other structure you can see with the if else statement is basically just looking at the Pantheon environment variables to determine if it's the dev environment or not. And if it's not the dev environment, it's just going to treat it as the local environment. If you had those 13, or we'll just say 3 or 4 environments, you would come in here and you would do probably an if else or a switch case to say, hey, if it's dev or test or live, here's how I want you to
All right.
approach that from a config split standpoint.
Yeah, so on our Pantheon dev, we're going to enable live and disable local. And then on local, in DDev on my machine, disable live
So,
and enable local.
so Mike, I have a question for you here.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you actually need the false value? Because I've only ever said, hey, make this one true. I've never made one false.
You actually don't.
Okay.
Um, I do like I like having all of them listed so I can kind of see. And honestly, I don't know what would happen if someone accidentally checks this box for like a local split in a live environment. Would this override that or vice versa? I would hope that
That
this
would
would
override.
override. So
Yes.
it's also I think it's a safety valve, not
Yeah,
safety
yeah.
valve,
You
but
got belt and
backup.
suspenders going on here. I got it. I got it.
God, you know me so well. You know me.
Yeah, so we're good here. I mean, this is
Okay.
going to, if we save this right now, right? And then we go back into our config split screen and refresh that, you'll see, hey, local is active. Perfect.
Right.
Okay, so we've made some config changes here, right? Let's actually just do a config export real quick, just to make sure that we capture those. So you'll see here we have our splits being exported. Core extensions is being exported because we enabled config split, right? So those all look like we want them to. There we go.
Oops. Commit dash M. Okay.
All right. Okay, so we're good here. So now in our local environment, what do we want to do, Mike? We want to enable devel, right?
That's it. Yep.
And that's it. So let's go and actually back into our split really quick.
Well, I don't think Devel is enabled yet. Should we enable Devel first?
We're gonna actually,
Okay.
I'm gonna try to set up the split first, and
Okay.
then we're gonna enable Devel. So if we scroll down here in our split, we're gonna see two areas. One is a complete split, and one is a keep going,
Sorry.
scroll, keep scrolling.
There
Yep,
we go.
partial split, right? So we're gonna focus on the complete split for right now, and then we'll focus on the partial split in our next step. So as a complete split, what this is going to do is this is not going to update the common module file, right? The core extensions file. It's actually going to create in your split directory a file that says, hey, when this split's enabled, enable this module, right? So let's click the devel checkbox there.
Right. I want to make, I want to, I want to be very careful about something though. If all we're doing is enabling a module in a split, I don't actually think you're going to get anything in here because the fact that a module is enabled ends up in the configuration of this split. I think where you end up, you end up with files in your local and live split. We'll definitely see it for the live split, but if we were to do a complete split of a configuration item,
Mm-hmm.
then that would end up in the directory. So,
Correct. Yeah. So sometimes if there are module specific configs, you may see them in there, but
right.
to be honest, that's a little bit of a gray area for me because I'm not
Well,
sure if it
yeah,
just
I think if we enable devel and then tweak the configuration of devel and then save and export our
yeah.
split, then that will end up in the local directory. But
Yep.
if we just enable devel, take all the default settings, you know, there's no need for there to be anything to get exported because it's all default settings.
Right. Makes
It's a,
sense.
yeah, it's a nuance, but I did want to point it out.
Yeah. All right. So let's make sure we save this so that way we have that
That's a
saved.
that's a solid idea. All
Burp,
right.
there we go. So you should be able to actually see that change in the config synchronization if you look at it, right? Let's look. Let's see what we got. Hey, look at that. And yep, there we go. And you can see the change, module devel. Perfect. So now we can go ahead and enable devel, right? And then burp, 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 doop. Perfect. And then if we refresh, we see right at the top in the bar there, there's the devel cog and icon, right? So right next to
Yep.
local. So now we know it's enabled. Perfect. We see that there's a change to our configuration. And yep, you can see that. So let's go ahead and do an export of our configuration, right?
All right. So again, I'm very repetitive when I teach this, but so everything we just did, modifying the local split, enabling the devel module, all that happened in the database. Nothing has affected any of these files. So we're going
Correct.
to export all of that configuration we just did from the database into the files.
There you go.
Now, this is the interesting part because we see a bunch of stuff here,
Mm-hmm.
but we only see one thing there, and that's
Yep.
because of the split.
Yep.
Oh, actually, okay. So it did actually output those into the local directory.
Yeah, because what it's
Okay.
doing is it's saving those config items into the local directory because that's where it's going to be used. I think
Right.
the first time we did this, we didn't see that because
Right.
we didn't configure the split before we enabled the
Right.
module. So,
Right. I think you're
um,
right. Yep.
so lucky viewer, you're getting the goods here. So, yep. Hey, look at that. Everything cleared up. Everything looks good, right?
Yep.
Devel's installed. We're on our local split. Wonderful.
So if I come here, I'm gonna do my git stuff, git add config, git status. You can see so our split configuration has changed because we added the complete split of devel, and then all of those devel configuration files because they're only necessary on local because we split them out. They go in the local split and they're not part of common. So git commit added devel to local split. So now I'm going to do a push. All right, so we have a couple minutes while that goes up to Pantheon. So you want to talk about the live split here while we're waiting on that?
Yeah, we can actually go ahead and configure that. So let's
Okay.
actually let's go into our settings file, right? And let's
This one?
nope, actually into the code, because we're actually
Okay.
going to enable the live split, right? And the
Okay.
reason we want to do this is because we're going to make changes to the live split that we want to make sure well, actually let me ask you the question. Do we want to set up SMTP in our local and have it be off in local, on in live, or do we want to
Yeah.
okay, so we
So
want to do that.
right now it's off right now.
Okay.
I want to turn it on in the live split.
Okay, so do you have the config for SMTP in your common folder?
Yes, so we can look at that. Let's
Okay.
look at that real quick. So if we come here, let me make this so it's a little bit wider.
There you
If we
go.
open
Okay.
that config real quick,
Yep.
you
You're
can
gonna
see.
Yep, it's false.
False.
Okay, great.
Okay.
All right. So then in that case, then let's do this. Let's switch our else statement so it's true for live and false for local. There you go. And then you're going to do a config import.
So I'm going to just rebuild caches because that's what we do.
So do you ever use the double ampersand when you're doing that sort of stuff?
If I'm working, if I'm consulting by myself, yes. If I'm teaching, never.
What, right. Yeah. Okay. So
Yep.
that makes sense. I was sorry.
Yep.
I should have prefaced it with when you're coding by yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing to note here on the synchronization screen, right? They've added this nice little thing that tells you which split you're using. So you can see that we're actually using the live split right now. And you can see
Yep.
that, hey, there are changes that need to be dealt with here because the live split differs from the local split. Right.
Right. And this is kind of a pet peeve of mine, these words right here. Because it's very misleading, or it can be misleading,
Can be.
on the
Yeah.
synchronized page. So the way I read this page is if I click this button, then I will get one thing changed and these three will be removed.
From the
Which
active
from
configuration.
the active config. And that kind of makes sense because only the local split has devel enabled.
Right.
And I'm no longer using the local split. I'm using the live split. So if I want to sync my site with the live split, devel cannot be enabled. And that's exactly what will happen.
Yep. So let's do that. And you'll watch it happen. And there we go. Hey, look at that. Nice
no
and
more
clean.
devel up there.
No more devel.
No
Okay.
more devel module.
So what are we doing here with our local? We want to enable SMTP mail in our local environment, right? So what we're going to do, well, before we do that, we're actually going to go into our config split, right? And what we're going to do is we're actually going to do a partial split on our live split. Sorry to use the word split so many times. Now, what a partial split does, and I'm going to try to explain this, and hopefully it's just not more confusing, right? So when we have our configuration, right, we have the common folder, we have our local folder, and we have our live folder, right? Common has all of the config that is being applied to all of the sites, right? So for in our example, we have common. Common does not have devel in it. Devel is only in our local split, right? So that configuration was split out. Now what we're going to do is
one might say it was completely split out.
Haha, I see what you did there using the terminology. I like it. What we're going to do here now is we have our live split and our local split, right? They're both using SMTP, right? We just want to partially split them or partially change that configuration between the two environments, right? So we're going to set
still
up
want configuration in both. We just want slightly different. We
right.
don't want to change part of the configuration.
So the module itself will be kept in common as, hey, this module's on, but the configuration for each will be partially split out between the two environments, right?
Right.
So we go to the partial split section. You have a list of configuration items, right? We are going to scroll down to SMTP, which should be there. Yep. And we're going to split that out. So basically, this is going to take the whole SMTP settings file and split it out. And this way we can make changes in this configuration and they'll be saved to their own file. Now, if you wanted to get really granular and say, hey, I don't want to split out the whole file. I literally only want to split out the configuration that turns the module on or off. You could do that in the additional configuration box
Actually,
below.
I think that's the default behavior now with later versions. I think we'll see it's just going to give us the diff now. I think.
Interesting.
Yeah, we'll see. I think that's what you're saying, what was definitely true at one point, but I think the later versions of config split now are just show you a little diff. But we'll see. We'll see in a moment.
I actually think you're right, because I think the last time we did this, I remember that being the case. Okay, so now we've split that out, right? Let's go into configuration for SMTP, and then let's flip this to be on. Boom, save that, right?
That's the only change we'll make.
Boop. And now we can go into our sync page, and we'll see that we have two things changed here, right? False true, perfect. And then our config split, burp, it is SMTP settings.
Yep.
So now if we export this.
Right, because we want to take what's in the database, what we just changed, we want to put that in the file system.
And you'll notice again that on the sync page there, right, we had two changes. One was to SMTP settings, one was to the split. But when we did that export, right, you only saw the one that was in the split, right?
This is, yeah, because this is in common, and the other stuff ended up in the live split.
Correct. Yep.
Okay, so I don't want to commit this change. That's a temporary.
No, you don't want to commit that change.
Git add config. We're going to set it back in a moment anyway. Git status. All right, so here is the, oops, sorry. Here is the patched configuration. So this is the partial.
Yep.
All right, and if we look at that real quick, I mean, it's pretty straightforward when you see it. You're adding this.
Oh yeah, you're right. You're right. So they went to a patch for partials. They went to a patch version where if you go into the complete split section and you split the config in the complete split section, it would actually do the whole thing. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's what we saw with Devel. We have the whole configuration there.
Exactly. Yep.
All right. So where am I? So git status, git commit -m. So configure, or let's do added SMTP stuff to live split. Git status.
So now,
what do you want to do next?
Yeah, well, that's going up and getting right on Pantheon. Let's actually do a git checkout for your settings.php file to get it back to what it was.
So old school, man. It's restore now.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Wow, that is embarrassing. We've been doing this a long time. That's, you know what that is? That's experience talking right there.
Well, I mean, I'm always restore, huh? I'm gonna have to start using that. That's what's the shortcut for that?
Did I not push? Git push. I'm gonna push that up now. I'm gonna push up our change.
Is that a GRE? Is that what that is? Git restore.
I don't know.
Okay.
Right, so now that, so why are we seeing this?
Because if you look right at the top there, right? Which split are you using? You're using the local split again, right? So what did we just do? We pulled down our original settings.php, right? So that reset all of our environment variables and all of our configuration variables to use the local split again. So
Right.
we're
Yeah.
seeing
So here we
changes
see
here
that. See
because
another view of that right here. So now local is active,
exactly. Yep.
live is inactive.
So we're seeing all those changes because our local split, we want Devel installed, right? We want SMTP switched to off, right? So that's why that's basically all of those changes that we're seeing.
Yeah. So
So
theoretically, let's do this. So if I go to here, you can see it's on because
correct,
that's a remnant of the live split because our config isn't synced.
correct.
If I sync our config, this
Import.
will
Yep,
enable Devel, which is now enabled,
yep.
and it should switch off SMTP.
There you go. All right.
And then similarly, if we are still going, Pantheon's still going, but once it's done, we'll come back to this live site, which from our settings that we have in here on Pantheon Dev, live split is enabled, local split is false.
Mm-hmm.
So after we do a config import there, Devel will be disabled on Pantheon Dev, and SMTP will be enabled. Well, it'll be on. So
So let's see. Are we still working through that?
Pantheon's doing its thing. So here I'll be impatient and hit the yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, that's what being impatient
If
gets
you
you.
if you click on workflows, I think it shows you the progress meter.
Yeah.
Does it? Yeah, there
It's
you
not
go.
always I don't believe this number.
Yeah, it's not always accurate, but I will say it's better than
Yeah. So let's talk about one other thing while we're waiting.
sure.
It won't take too long, but something that's kind of important is once you implement the configuration system, once you're using the configuration system, and especially once you're using config split,
Mm-hmm.
anytime you do a git pull and bring code in,
Mm-hmm.
you need to do that config import.
Correct.
Anytime you switch branches, even local branches, you need
Yep.
to do the config import. And then conversely, anytime you are about to make a commit, or anytime you make a commit, or but you have to export config,
Mm-hmm.
right? So running that config import and export commands, those need to become part of like your daily Git workflow because it's
Yep.
config becomes code, so you have to treat it like code.
Yeah, it definitely needs to be part of your kind of development process. And a lot of teams that I've worked on have actually implemented it so that it's part of the CI/CD process. So when something gets pushed out to a dev server, the config import automatically runs, the cache is clear, all of that stuff. So
Right.
you definitely, once you start using configuration management, want to make sure you're building it into those processes so that way everybody can kind of stay on the same page.
So this is interesting because we haven't actually we're on Pantheon Dev. We actually haven't done an import that enabled config split yet.
Right.
So we're going to end up having to do two imports here. One
Yep.
to enable config split and bring these in, and then the second import will apply the splits themselves or the
Correct.
splits. So here's the first one. So here comes config split. And then notice the devel is still enabled. But now it sees that there's a live split. We got
And
some
you,
changes. So
yep.
let's
Oh,
bring
before
those.
you,
Oh, sorry.
I was going to view the differences, but that's all right.
Okay.
We'll just see them in real time.
Although, okay, yeah. So we should, this is not devel. This is the dev environment. I misspoke a second ago, but we can confirm that the devel module is not enabled. Here, let's do one thing at a time. I know we're up against a time for, how about I click on it? So
There you go.
SMTP is enabled and devel should not be enabled on this site, and it is not. So
Look at
there
that.
you go. And yeah, that's it. So we created a local split that enables the devel module. a live split that turns on SMTP as a partial. And from here on out, now it's just a matter of, you know, maybe you want to have something that is live in production, but not anywhere else. Or maybe you want to have some developer tools that are available only on local, but not anywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, I use I use the splits for enabling and disabling caching and stuff like that in my local.
There's a big one for local as well that neither of us have mentioned yet. Stage file proxy.
So admittedly, I don't typically use stage file proxy. I know, but yes, that is a great one as well.
Okay. This no one will ever see this show and tell now. We just wasted the last hour because that's embarrassing right there. So are you just bringing down files directories, or you just don't need them, so you're just dealing with broken images?
Um, well, so that case sometimes, but typically,
Yeah.
especially with Pantheon, Pantheon has a pull command in
Yeah.
DDEV, so
Yeah.
I can just pull Pantheon and have it pull down the files in database right
I
from
don't
the
want all
dev.
that. I don't need all those files. That's no. Maybe I'm the weird one. I love stage file proxy. Love it.
I mean, I think it
Yeah.
has a great use case. I just, I prefer to have the actual like files and stuff
Okay.
on my local just to make sure I'm same to same, you know.
Fair enough. All right. Well, I know we're up against the top of the hour, and John, I know that you have to get going, so I think we're all set here. Thank you very much for your time and for walking us through this, and we will continue to enjoy your voice and occasionally your face on Talking Drupal.
Perfect. Thanks a lot, Mike. Have a good one.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss future episodes. Don't forget, if you have a need for professional Drupal training, be sure to check us out at DrupalEasy.com.